Wizards have always been the Boy Scouts of Dungeons & Dragons. Their motto, "Be Prepared," is the motto that we live by. And now we can be prepared even when we're not. Wizards seem to have had some of the fewest changes in the 2024 Player's Handbook. But that might actually be because Wizards are widely considered to be a pretty solid class as it is. The changes that were made seem to largely be quality of life, but do lean nicely into the Be Prepared theme of the Wizard and give us a few extra tricks and options that should be fun at the table. Cantrip Formula's ability from Tasha's is now baked into the Wizard, meaning that you can change one cantrip every long rest for your iconic spellcaster. This definitely leans into giving you the option to prepare for different things on any different day, including dealing the kind of damage type that the monster you're going to face is going to need in order to get the biggest boom for your buck. The change that takes away your intelligence modifier from the table of how many spells you can prepare is one that I'm a little uncertain as to why it was implemented, but it remains to be seen how many is going to be on that number and whether or not the different classes are going to have different numbers, or if everybody is just going to follow a sorcerer-esque list of how many spells they know. All classes are now able to cast spells that they have prepared that have the ritual tag as rituals, which is something that's going to come as a bit of a quality of life improvement for a handful of other classes. But for Wizards, it just means that they had to create a new tag or a new ability that allows you to still do the same thing if it's in your book in order to retain the same functionality from 2014. Since we're no longer getting our subclass at level 2, we now get to have the Scholar ability, which is essentially just expertise in one of our wizard skills. We're limited to a specific list that somewhat fits the wizardly themes, and honestly I think adding expertise as a wizard class feature is actually really cool, because we ended up a lot of the time seeing rogues that were trained in Arcana or in history or investigation especially that had taken an expertise and were suddenly much better at being the smart guy than the only guy in the room who had an intelligence score that was of any worthy note because it was required for everything else that they did. Leaning hard into making the smart guy the smartest guy in at least their field is a nice touch for the Wizard. We'll come back to subclasses at the end, but there's definitely been some changes made there. Because at 5th level, we get the Memorize Spell ability, which is essentially the quintessential Wizard is sitting down studying their book during the time that everybody else is resting, eating, or doing something else, and during a short rest, you can swap out one of the spells that you have prepared. This is where we get to be prepared for what is coming later on in our day simply by spending a little bit of time now. It doesn't preclude us using a short rest, which means we still get to recover from the battles that we've faced so far, and if we had any abilities that we know are no longer going to use in the dungeon that we're involved in, then we can swap out a spell of, say, psychic type damage against a bunch of golems and replace it with something that's going to be more effective. Spell Mastery saw some minor tweaks with some big changes. They added a limitation that was obviously the closing of a loophole that whatever 1st or 2nd level spell you chose with your Spell Mastery was going to be a spell that only took one action to cast. So there's no longer any option to get unlimited silvery barbs or shields. And they made it so that you can only swap one spell at a time, not both, but that you can change one of your spells every time you finish a long rest instead of having to additionally spend 8 hours of time studying your spellbook. This means that you can prepare for every single day with the exact right combinations that are going to make things work best for you, leaning hard into that preparation role, and it closing that loophole on unlimited shields and unlimited silvery barbs and unlimited absorb elements, etc., is definitely a nice little touch. The Abjurer's Arcane Ward has had its language clarified, which seems like code for we won't want to tell you exactly how that's going to change yet until you buy the book, but we'll see how that really shapes out. Being able to recharge it directly as a bonus action by expending a spell slot sounds a little suspiciously like you're not going to be able to do the shenanigans that people have pulled before, where they pick up, say, an Eldritch Invocation to be able to cast Mage Armor at will and consistently sit there casting over and over again to fill back up, but we'll have to wait and see until the book actually comes out. At 10th level, they're giving a new feature allowing you to cast Dispel Magic as a bonus action, and giving you Counterspell and Dispel Magic as always prepared spells. And as part of that feature, if you fail to Dispel Magic or Counterspell Magic, then you don't expend the spell slot. It remains to be seen exactly what the language is on that one, but there's a couple of interesting situations that I think might pop up. One, for instance, where you're consistently casting Dispel Magic on every object that you run across in order to try and get rid of arcane locks or glyphs or other wardings that are in place, and if there's nothing actually there, then you haven't lost anything by trying because you didn't expend any spell slot. Depending on the language, that could be a little bit of a weird interaction and or hack, but we'll see. It could be that you only receive your spell back if there was something there and you attempted the check and failed the actual dice roll, but it'll be down to language. The other question, of course, is whether or not at 10th level you still get the iconic improved Abjuration ability to add your proficiency modifier to those counterspelling and dispel checks. They say the Diviner didn't see many changes, which probably means that Portent is continuing on for the Diviner in the same fashion that it always has been. They have made some changes to Third Eye to try to make it more exciting and useful, as opposed to the super exciting Portent ability. Essentially, you get a longer range dark vision so that all the species, races, whatever you want to call them, that do get dark vision are no longer missing out because they happen to choose Diviner Wizard. The See Invisibility option, which was a terrifyingly worthless 10-foot range, now casts the See Invisibility spell without expending any kind of spell slot, giving you an unlimited range based on your normal sight for See Invisibility and the option to see into the ethereal plane, which explains why they removed the ethereal sight option. And now it's a bonus action to do any of these options, meaning you can do so in combat without it negatively affecting your action economy and leaving you unable to do something more useful than just be able to spot your foe. All in all, I think this is a huge boost up for the Third Eye ability and makes it a much more useful and interesting ability. Maybe not quite as potent as Portent, but as P-words go, it's going to be pretty powerful. The Evoker wizard is just seeing some minor changes, swapping around their mid-level abilities so that now, at 6th level, they get to add their intelligence modifier to a damage roll on one dice of every spell that they cast, and then at 10th level improving their cantrips so that when they force somebody to make a saving throw, if that person succeeds on the saving throw, they still take half damage. And now this applies also to attack rolls that miss, meaning that if you fire off your firebolt, you're still dealing half of the 4d10 damage at top level. This is a nice little change because it did feel like the Evoker got pigeonholed into certain save or suck spells as far as their cantrips were concerned, and frankly, the attack roll cantrips are often the more potent ones. Plus, people prefer to be in control of their dice when it comes to making attacks instead of leaving it up to their opponents to decide whether or not they hit or miss. Sounds like there's been a lot of changes to the Illusionist, and we're going to have to see the language to really understand exactly what's going on. But for starters, we're doing away with the focus on the cantrip that came in at level 2 previously, to instead give some kind of changes to how you cast illusions. Removing verbal components to make some of your illusions a little bit more subtle is a nice touch, and increasing range remains to be seen exactly how that's going to be applied, especially since we don't know what spells it's going to be applied to. If I had to throw out a guess, I would expect at least Minor Illusion or maybe any of the image spells to get a range boost. At 6th level, they gain the ability to summon either beasts or fae using those spells, but using a modified version that allows them to be cast as an illusion and gaining free casts of this, giving the Illusionist a bit of a summoner focus as they're creating phantasmal creatures to fight on their behalf, which is actually a throwback to some of the cool Illusionist options back in 2nd edition. The final reveal that we've been given is that Illusory Self, the ability to turn a hit into a miss by interposing an illusory duplicate, is now going to be able to be reused by expending a 2nd level or higher spell slot instead of requiring a short or long rest to recharge every time. We're being told that it won't require any action to restore, but doesn't necessarily mean that it won't still require a reaction in order to use the ability. Which is good, so we don't have illusionists just being able to burn through spell slots and ignore everything that comes their way, but and being able to do so every single round as long as you're spending your spell slots is a potent defensive buff for the Illusionist. One of the big changes for the 2024 Wizard is that we are only receiving these 4 subclasses for the Wizard, meaning that there are 4 other schools of wizardry out there that we will likely be seeing in a future release. Until that happens, though, we're going to have to make do with what we've got, or use the 2014 versions. But I would assume that we won't be made to wait too long for Wizard replacements. Thanks for watching all the way to the end here. If you want to check out more, then there should be some videos here to click on. But until next time, thanks for watching. Happy adventuring.